Welcome to our channel. Have you ever wondered about the untold stories, the secrets hidden just beneath the surface of everyday life? The whispers of the city, the mysteries lurking in the shadows of ordinary lives? They say that every brick, every street corner, every fleeting glance holds a story waiting to be uncovered. Some are beautiful, some are tragic, and some are terrifying to their very core. Before we delve into such a story, one that shook an entire city, a chilling account of darkness and the relentless pursuit of light, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to our channel to uncover more mysteries, delve deeper into the darkest facets of human nature, and embark on journeys you'll never forget. Now, turn off the lights, settle in, and prepare for a story that will etch itself into your mind. The first call came on a crisp, unforgiving Monday morning in late October. Los Angeles, a city perpetually basking in a golden artificial glow, was still stirring from its slumber when the news channels began to hum with a low, ominous frequency. A body had been found in Griffith Park, near the iconic observatory, a place usually teeming with tourists and stargazers. But this discovery was far from celestial. It was terrestrial, brutal, and deeply unsettling. Detective Elias Thorne, a man whose face bore the indelible roadmap of 2 decades on the force, was sipping lukewarm coffee in his cluttered office at the LAPD Wilshire Division when his pager buzzed. His partner, Detective Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-witted investigator barely half his age, but with a mind like a steel trap, was already halfway out the door. Her phone had rung first, a frantic dispatcher on the other end. "Griffith Park," Jenkins stated, pulling on her worn leather jacket, her voice tight with an urgency Thorne knew well. "Homicide. Sounds grim." Thorne grunted, pushing himself from his creaking chair. "Doesn't it always, Sarah?" Yet, even as he spoke the words, a familiar chill prickled his neck. Something in Jenkins's tone, a slight tremor he hadn't heard often, suggested this was different. Los Angeles was no stranger to violence, but there were some cases that tore at the fabric of the city, leaving lasting scars. This, he suspected, might be one of them. The drive to Griffith Park was a blur of early morning traffic and flashing blue lights. As they ascended the winding roads, the city sprawled beneath them, a glittering tapestry of dreams and desperation. But at the crime scene, the glamour faded, replaced by the stark reality of human depravity. The area was cordoned off, a hive of activity with uniformed officers, forensic teams, and ghoulish media vans already circling like vultures. The victim was a young woman, no older than 25, laid out on a patch of dew-kissed grass with a macabre precision that immediately sent a shiver down Thorne's spine. Her eyes, wide and glassy, stared up at the vast, indifferent sky, reflecting the nascent sun. Her long, dark hair was fanned out meticulously around her head, almost artistic in its arrangement. She was dressed in a simple white gown, one that looked more suited for a wedding than a morgue slab. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no ripped clothing, no disturbed earth. It was as if she had simply drifted into this final pose. "Detective Thorne Jenkins," a uniformed officer greeted them, his face pale under his cap. "Bodies over here. Forensics just arrived." Thorne nodded, his gaze already locked on the tableau. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the lead forensic pathologist, a woman whose calm demeanor belied the horrors she routinely faced, was already kneeling beside the body, her gloved hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Cause of death appears to be a single, precise stab wound to the heart," Dr. Reed reported, her voice clinical but tinged with a faint note of unease. "Minimal external bleeding. Looks like a very sharp, thin blade. No defensive wounds. Toxicology will confirm, but no signs of forced incapacitation, either through drugs or physical restraint. She was either compliant, unconscious, or caught completely unawares." Jenkins knelt beside her, her keen eyes scanning the scene. "Any identification, Doc?" "Not yet. No ID on her person. But there's this." Dr. Reed pointed with a gloved finger. Resting delicately on the victim's chest, just above the wound, was a small, perfectly cut shard of obsidian. It was jet black, polished to a mirror finish, and disturbingly beautiful. Thorne picked it up with a gloved hand, the stone feeling unnaturally cold. It was heavier than it looked, its edges sharp but not jagged. Obsidian. Volcanic glass. He frowned. Why leave something like this? A signature, perhaps? Jenkins suggested, her brow furrowed in concentration. Or a message. It doesn't look like an accidental dropping. It's placed. The victim's name was Anya Sharma, an aspiring actress, new to the city, working as a barista to make ends meet. Her small apartment in Silver Lake was barely furnished, a testament to her struggle, filled with headshots and screenplays. Her parents, contacted in Ohio, were devastated. They couldn't imagine who would want to harm their ambitious, naive daughter. She had no enemies, no known connections to anything remotely dangerous. Her life was an open book, filled with dreams of stardom. The media, initially hesitant, exploded with the story. The Griffith Park murder. Aspiring actress found dead. The Obsidian Shard became a macabre detail that captivated the public imagination. News anchors speculated about cults, satanic rituals, or a deranged fan. The LAPD, however, had nothing. No witnesses, no CCTV footage from that specific, secluded spot, no forced entry at her apartment. Just a dead girl, a precise wound, and a mysterious black stone. 3 days later, the city was still reeling when the second call came. This time, the location was starkly different. A lavish penthouse apartment in downtown Los Angeles, overlooking the financial district, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city that Anya Sharma had only dreamed of conquering. The victim was Richard Maxwell, a prominent venture capitalist, renowned for his ruthless business acumen and his opulent lifestyle. His body was found by his personal assistant, laid out on a white marble dining table, surrounded by flickering scented candles. He, too, was dressed in a pristine white silk robe, and just like Anya Sharma, a single polished shard of obsidian rested on his chest, precisely over the stab wound that had pierced his heart. Thorne stared at the scene, the opulence a stark contrast to the grim reality. "Well, this certainly isn't a random act, is it?" he muttered, more to himself than to Jenkins. 2 victims. Same MO. But what connects an aspiring actress from Silver Lake to a billionaire financier in a penthouse? Jenkins was already poring over Maxwell's extensive collection of modern art. Different demographics, entirely different lives. No obvious links. No signs of forced entry here either. And the staging. It's almost ceremonial. She ran a gloved finger over a particularly grotesque abstract sculpture. This killer has a very specific aesthetic. Dr. Reed was back, her expression grim. Same wound. Same precision. No defensive wounds. Tox results for Sharma were clean. No drugs or alcohol in her system. This killer is remarkably efficient, Thorne, and quiet. No struggle, no alarms, no witnesses in either case. The realization dawned on everyone present. They weren't dealing with a one-off psychopath or a gang-related hit. This was something far more sinister, more intelligent, more methodical. This was a serial killer. The media, no longer hesitant, went into a frenzy. They needed a name. The Obsidian Killer. The Los Angeles Tableau Slayer. Eventually, the Obsidian Slayer stuck. Panic began to spread through the city like a virus. Wealthy residents fortified their homes. Poor struggling artists looked over their shoulders. No one was safe. The fear was amplified by the lack of a discernible motive or connection between the victims. If the killer wasn't targeting a specific demographic, then anyone could be next. Thorne and Jenkins worked tirelessly, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread. They delved into the victims' lives, scrutinizing every detail. Anya Sharma had lived a modest, if hopeful, life. Richard Maxwell, on the other hand, had a network of associates as vast as his wealth, many of whom harbored grudges. But none of these grudges, however deep, seemed to fit the bizarre ritualistic nature of the murders. It's not about revenge, not in the traditional sense, Jenkins theorized late one night, surrounded by overflowing whiteboards covered in victim profiles, timelines, and speculative maps. If it were, there would be more anger, more mess. This is too clean, too deliberate. This killer isn't just killing. They're performing. A performance for whom? Thorne countered, rubbing his temples. The city? Themselves? And what's the message? They brought in Captain Morales, a no-nonsense commander who had seen it all. We need a profile. Fast, Morales barked, his patience wearing thin under the relentless media scrutiny. FBI's on standby. This is quickly becoming a national story. The initial FBI profile was chilling. They were looking for an organized, highly intelligent individual, likely male, meticulous and methodical, with a strong internal locus of control. He derived satisfaction not just from the act of killing, but from the ritual, the staging, and the terror he instilled. The obsidian shard suggested a symbolic meaning, perhaps related to judgment, darkness, or a connection to ancient cultures. He was likely a loner, isolated but socially competent enough to blend in. He saw himself as an artist, a judge, perhaps even a god. The pressure mounted. Every phone call, every lead, every potential witness led to a dead end. The killer was a phantom, leaving behind only perfectly staged bodies and the chilling obsidian calling card. The fear in Los Angeles became palpable. People started canceling plans, staying indoors, or moving out of the city altogether. The vibrant, bustling metropolis was slowly being suffocated by an invisible terror. Thorne found himself haunted by the victim's eyes, by the thought of a predator moving silently through the city, selecting his next canvas. Jenkins, meanwhile, began to see patterns in the seemingly disparate lives. Anya Sharma, the aspiring starlet, representing youthful ambition and the superficiality of Hollywood dreams. Richard Maxwell, the titan of industry, symbolizing greed and unchecked power. Was the killer enacting a perverse form of social commentary? A judgment on the perceived sins of the city? The thought was unsettling. If so, what sins were next on the killer's macabre list? As October bled into November, the city held its breath. The mayor issued statements, the police increased patrols, but the fear persisted. Then, on a cold, foggy Tuesday morning, the call came again. This time, the scene was a small, independent art gallery in the trendy arts district, usually a hub of creativity and vibrant expression. But today it was a tomb. The victim was Eleanor Vance, a respected art critic, known for her sharp tongue and discerning eye. She was found draped across a pedestal where a new sculpture should have been, her body meticulously arranged to mimic a classical pose. Her white silk scarf was wrapped around her neck, not tight enough to cause strangulation, but a symbolic touch. And inevitably, the single polished shard of obsidian rested on her chest, piercing her pristine white blouse, just above her heart. The third victim. The pattern was undeniable, the terror absolute. The Obsidian Slayer was not only real, but growing bolder, more confident, turning the very fabric of Los Angeles into his chilling, artistic canvas. The city braced itself, knowing that the monster among them was far from finished. And Thorne and Jenkins, standing amidst the sterile silence of the latest crime scene, knew they were in a race against time, desperately trying to understand the twisted mind of a killer who saw murder as art, before he turned their entire city into his masterpiece of death. The murder of Eleanor Vance sent a shockwave that resonated far beyond the confines of the arts district. An art critic, a symbol of judgment and taste, added another layer of sinister meaning to the Obsidian Slayer's spree. The media, now ravenous, churned out daily headlines speculating on the killer's motive, his identity, and the growing incompetence of the police. Hashtags like Obsidian Terror and LA Fear dominated social media. The city, once vibrant and bustling, was slowly succumbing to a chilling paralysis. For Detective Thorne and Jenkins, the case had consumed their lives. Their office, now a war room, was a labyrinth of maps, victim photographs, and complex psychological profiles. Sleep was a luxury, replaced by the bitter taste of stale coffee and the gnawing frustration of dead ends. 3 victims. Anya Sharma, the hopeful, struggling actress. Richard Maxwell, the ruthless venture capitalist. Eleanor Vance, The opinionated art critic, Jenkins rattled off, pacing in front of the whiteboard, her voice hoarse from endless briefings. What is the common thread, Elias? Beyond the white clothing, the obsidian, and the precise stab wound. Thorne stared at the faces pinned to the board, their eyes seeming to accuse him from beyond the grave. It's the performance, Sarah. He's making a statement with each victim, a commentary on some aspect of this city. The pursuit of fame, the greed for wealth, the judgment of art. It's a critique, a twisted artistic statement. FBI profiler Dr. Eleanor Vance, no relation to the victim. A macabre coincidence that hadn't gone unnoticed. Arrived from Quantico, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with an unnerving ability to see into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Her initial assessment confirmed their fears. We're looking for an extremely intelligent, highly organized individual, likely male, mid-30s to late 40s. He's meticulous, patient, and possesses an almost artistic sensibility. The obsidian, the precise staging, the symbolic attire, these are not random acts of violence. They are deliberate performances. He likely sees himself as an architect of justice, a moral arbiter for a city he perceives as decadent or corrupt. Dr. Vance continued, her gaze sweeping over Thorne and Jenkins, assessing their weariness. He derives immense satisfaction from the control he exerts, the fear he instills, and the message he believes he's sending. He's likely a loner, socially adept enough to blend in, but fundamentally alienated. He might have a background in the arts, perhaps failed as an artist himself, or holds a deep resentment towards the established order. But why these specific victims? Jenkins pressed. What do they represent to him? That's the key, Detective, Vance replied. There's a specific trigger, a personal grievance, or a set of values he's reacting against. He's not just killing, he's lecturing. The investigation expanded, drawing in resources from across the state. Every art gallery in LA was scrutinized, every art student, every disgruntled critic, every failed artist. Maxwell's business dealings were re-examined, Sharma's few acquaintances interrogated again. But the killer remained elusive, a shadow slipping through the cracks of a sprawling metropolis. Thorne, a man who believed in concrete evidence, found himself wrestling with the abstract nature of the killer's motives. It's like trying to catch a ghost, he muttered to Jenkins one evening, staring out at the rain-slicked streets of Hollywood. He leaves no trace, no eyewitnesses, just a message no one can fully decipher. Jenkins, however, was a relentless bloodhound when she caught a scent. The obsidian, Elias, is too specific. It's not just a prop. It means something more, culturally, historically, or personally. She'd spent hours researching the stone, its uses in ancient cultures, its mystical properties. Obsidian was used for tools, weapons, and ritualistic purposes, often associated with protection, truth, and cutting through illusions. It was also volcanic glass, born of the Earth's fiery core. She started looking for connections among the victims that went deeper than their superficial roles. Sharma, Maxwell, Vance. The glitz, the greed, the judgment. Was there a common denominator in their private lives? The breakthrough, small but significant, came from an unexpected source. A former intern of Eleanor Vance, a timid young woman named Chloe, recalled a heated argument between Vance and a man at an exclusive, members-only art salon called The Veiled Canvas. It was a shadowy collective, rumored to deal in ethically dubious art, and known for its secretive nature and powerful clientele. Vance was furious, Chloe recounted, nervously fiddling with her hair. She said he was a fraud, a charlatan, trying to pass off cheap imitations as profound commentary. He was very calm, very intense. He just smiled and said, "Some truths are only revealed in the darkest reflections, Ms. Vance." The man's name was Arthur Sterling, a name that initially drew blanks. He wasn't a prominent artist or a well-known figure in the art world. Further digging revealed he was a former art history lecturer at a small, defunct private college, known for his eccentric theories and a few controversial, largely ignored, philosophical essays on the intersection of art and moral decay. He had a small trust fund, lived modestly in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood in the valley, and had no criminal record. He was, to all appearances, utterly unremarkable. Except, Jenkins discovered, Arthur Sterling had been an early, enthusiastic member of the Veiled Canvas. In fact, he was one of its founding members, envisioning it as a genuine platform for raw, unvarnished artistic expression, a counterpoint to what he saw as the superficiality of the mainstream art world. But his vision had quickly soured. The collective, under the influence of its increasingly wealthy and connected members, including Richard Maxwell, had devolved into a playground for the rich, a place for pretentious parties and the trading of exotic, often illicit, art and influence. Eleanor Vance, initially a supporter, had grown disgusted by its commercialism and had publicly denounced it. And Anya Sharma, desperate for connections, had briefly, unknowingly, worked as a caterer for a few of their exclusive parties, catching a glimpse of their decadent world. "It all connects, Elias," Jenkins exclaimed, her eyes bright with a mixture of excitement and grim satisfaction. "The Veiled Canvas is the unifying thread. Anya, the lowest rung, catering their parties. Maxwell, a key financier, turning it into a profit machine. Vance, initially a champion, then a harsh critic. Sterling, he founded it. He saw his dream corrupted." Thorne leaned over the detailed timeline Jenkins had meticulously constructed. "So, he sees these people as symbolic of the corruption that destroyed his artistic vision. His justice is aimed at those who embodied the decay of what he believed in. The obsidian, volcanic glass, cutting through illusion, reflecting truth. To fit, the picture of Arthur Sterling began to sharpen. He was not a random psychopath, but a disillusioned idealist, twisted by a profound sense of betrayal and a narcissistic belief in his own moral superiority. He saw himself not as a killer, but as a purger, an artist using the ultimate canvas, human life. He's been watching them, observing their lives, waiting for the perfect moment to strike," Dr. Vance concluded, reviewing the new data. "This isn't just about the institution. It's deeply personal to him. He's taking back control, reclaiming his narrative through violence. The pressure to apprehend the Obsidian Slayer was at an all-time high. The mayor had declared a state of emergency, and the city was a ghost town after dark. Thorne and Jenkins, armed with Sterling's name and a clearer understanding of his twisted psychology, launched a full-scale surveillance operation. Sterling's apartment was unremarkable, almost Spartan. He lived alone, worked as a freelance art consultant for minor galleries, and spent his evenings reading dense philosophy texts or sculpting small, intricate obsidian figures in his living room. He was a creature of habit, meticulous, precise, and utterly unassuming. He went for daily walks in a local park, visited the same coffee shop, and browsed the same used bookstores. He was a ghost in plain sight, but the phantom had to be preparing for his next performance. They watched him for days, weeks, a suffocating vigil. Jenkins, scrutinizing every detail, noticed a subtle change. Sterling had started taking detours on his walks, lingering near certain public spaces, his gaze intense, assessing. He was looking for his next stage. One evening, Jenkins's gut instinct screamed. Sterling spent an unusually long time outside the Los Angeles Public Library, a grand historic building. He wasn't just observing the architecture, he was observing the patrons. Students, scholars, homeless intellectuals, people lost in the world of words and ideas. He lingered on a woman, a renowned literary historian known for her scathing reviews of populist literature, Professor Evelyn Hayes. She had also been a guest lecturer at The Veiled Canvas in its early days, before its corruption. She had written an essay, lauded by critics, but dismissed by Sterling as trivial, blind to the true darkness of humanity. "It's her, Elias," Jenkins whispered, her voice tight, watching Sterling through binoculars from their unmarked van. "He's judging the triviality of literature, the inability to grasp true human suffering. He's going to make a statement about the superficiality of intellectualism." Thorne felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. They had a name, a motive, a potential next victim. But Sterling was a master of stealth. Catching him in the act would be a nightmare. They couldn't simply arrest him on suspicion. They needed hard evidence, or to catch him red-handed. The stakes were too high, the city too terrified. They put a round-the-clock watch on Professor Hayes, covertly installing surveillance cameras around her home and office. The trap was set. Now, it was an agonizing waiting game, hoping their understanding of the killer's twisted mind would be enough to save a life, and finally bring the Obsidian Slayer's reign of terror to an end. The city held its breath, and Thorne and Jenkins braced themselves for the final, deadly act of Arthur Sterling's macabre performance. The threads were tangled, but they believed they finally saw the weaver. The city of Los Angeles had become a sprawling, anxious monument to fear. Days turned into weeks, the surveillance on Arthur Sterling and Professor Evelyn Hayes a relentless, nerve-fraying exercise. Thorne and Jenkins lived on the edge, their eyes perpetually scanning, their ears straining for any whisper of the killer's next move. The Obsidian Slayer had transformed their vibrant city into his silent, terrifying stage, and they were merely spectators, waiting for the curtain to rise on his next grim act. Jenkins, fueled by caffeine and an almost obsessive determination, delved deeper into Sterling's past. She found an old, self-published manifesto, a rambling treatise titled The Obsidian Truth, penned years ago when he was still an idealistic, albeit disillusioned, art history lecturer. In it, he railed against the superficiality of modern art, the corruption of intellectual circles, and the moral decay of society, particularly as he saw it embodied in Los Angeles. He spoke of art as a weapon, a tool for radical truth, and Obsidian as the ultimate medium for revealing the hidden darkness beneath polished facades. The manifesto was a blueprint for his murders, a chilling prophecy. "He believes he's cleansing the city," Jenkins murmured, holding the tattered booklet. "He sees himself as a prophet, a purger. His victims aren't just people. They're symbols of the sins he's trying to eradicate." Thorne nodded, a grim understanding dawning on him. Anya Sharma, the superficial pursuit of fame. Richard Maxwell, the greed of capitalism. Eleanor Vance, the hypocrisy of artistic judgment. And now, Professor Hayes, the intellectual elitism, the inability to truly understand the depths of human experience he believes only he can see. The night came, cold and clear, a stark contrast to the simmering tension in the air. Professor Hayes was scheduled to give a rare public lecture at the Los Angeles Public Library, ironically on the topic of narratives of redemption in modern literature. Sterling had been observed casing the library for days, his movements subtle, almost imperceptible. He was too smart, too cautious to make a move at such a public event, but they knew he was there, watching, waiting for his moment. The lecture concluded without incident. Thorne and Jenkins had plainclothes officers scattered throughout the library and surrounding blocks, their eyes glued to Sterling, who sat in the back row, a ghost in the audience, his gaze fixed on Hayes. He vanished subtly as the crowd dispersed. "He's going for her at home," Thorne stated, his voice tight. "He always strikes when they're alone, vulnerable, away from the spectacle." A covert team followed Professor Hayes's car, while Thorne and Jenkins raced towards Sterling's apartment, hoping to catch him preparing or find crucial evidence. They had to be careful. Sterling was not just a killer, he was an artist of deception. When they burst into Sterling's apartment, it was pristine, almost sterile. There was no sign of him, but on a small, meticulously organized desk, Jenkins found a single chilling clue. A freshly polished shard of obsidian, identical to those found at the crime scenes, resting on a blueprint of Professor Hayes's private study. On the blueprint, a red X marked a precise spot. It was a taunt, a final flourish of his twisted art. "He knows we're here," Thorne snarled, punching a fist into his palm. "He's playing with us. This is his final act, and he wants us to witness it." They radioed the surveillance team tailing Professor Hayes. "Code red. He's active. Secure Hayes immediately." But it was too late. Professor Hayes's home security system, state-of-the-art, had been expertly bypassed. The surveillance feed showed a brief flicker, then static. A single, dark figure, moving with unnerving speed and precision, had entered the house. Thorne and Jenkins sped towards Hayes's secluded Hollywood Hills residence, sirens wailing, a desperate race against the clock. The winding roads, usually a picturesque backdrop, now felt like a suffocating maze. Their hearts hammered against their ribs, a frantic rhythm accompanying the siren's shriek. When they arrived, the scene was eerily quiet. The front door was ajar. They drew their weapons, moving cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness inside. The house was immaculate, no signs of forced entry, no struggle. It was a reflection of the killer's meticulous nature, his disdain for unnecessary violence. They found Professor Hayes in her study, a room filled with towering bookshelves and the comforting scent of old paper. She was laid out on a large antique rug, dressed in a simple white linen nightgown. Her eyes, open and unblinking, stared at the ceiling, reflecting the faint glow from the hallway. And on her chest, a single black shard of obsidian. But something was different this time. Instead of just the stone, there was also a small, elegantly folded piece of parchment beneath it. Thorne carefully retrieved it with gloved hands. It was a note written in a precise, almost calligraphic script. The world sees only the surface, the polished lie. You, the critics, the judges, the seekers of false wisdom, you refuse to acknowledge the true darkness that breathes beneath. I have shown you. I have revealed the obsidian truth. Now the canvas is complete, the judgment rendered. The city, finally, sees itself as it truly is. Just as Thorne finished reading, a faint creak from upstairs shattered the silence. "He's still here," Jenkins whispered, her voice barely audible. They moved stealthily up the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. They found Sterling in the master bedroom, standing by a large window overlooking the glittering expanse of Los Angeles. He wasn't trying to hide. He simply stood there, a silhouette against the city lights, his back to them, seemingly admiring his final masterpiece. "Arthur Sterling," Thorne commanded, his voice echoing in the silent room. "LAPD, put your hands where I can see them." Sterling slowly turned. He was a man of average height, unremarkable features, dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit. His eyes, however, were anything but average. They burned with an intense, almost fanatical light, a chilling blend of serenity and triumph. There was no fear, no regret, only a profound, unsettling peace. "Detectives," Sterling said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "You finally arrived. I knew you would. It was all part of the performance, wasn't it? The pursuit, the revelation. Every artist needs an audience to truly appreciate his work." He gestured vaguely towards the city lights below. "A grand stage for a grand statement." "It's not art, Sterling," Jenkins retorted, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "It's murder. You're a monster." Sterling chuckled softly, a sound devoid of humor. "Monster or messenger?" The city was drowning in its own illusions. "I merely provided the obsidian mirror, the harsh truth. Look at them down there." He gestured again at the city. "They are finally awake, finally aware of the shadows they pretend don't exist. My work is done." "Your work isn't done," Thorne growled, stepping closer, his weapon still raised. "You're coming with us." Sterling merely smiled, a faint, eerie smile. "Ah, but the canvas is complete. The brushstrokes laid. The message delivered. What more is there to add?" His hand, almost imperceptibly, moved towards his inner jacket pocket. "Don't do it, Sterling," Jenkins yelled, seeing the glint of metal. But it was too late. Before they could react, Sterling pulled out a small, obsidian-handled dagger, its blade wickedly sharp, and with the same chilling precision he had used on his victims, he plunged it into his own heart. Thorne and Jenkins rushed forward, but it was a futile gesture. Sterling gasped, a single, almost theatrical sigh, and his eyes, still burning with that strange, triumphant light, fixed on Thorne for a moment. "The truth is revealed," he whispered, a faint smile playing on his lips, before his body slumped to the floor, lifeless. The room fell silent once more, save for the frantic pounding of Thorne's and Jenkins's hearts. The Obsidian Slayer was dead, his final act a dramatic, self-inflicted suicide, a last statement of control and defiance. The aftermath was a whirlwind of media frenzy, police investigations, and a city grappling with the horrifying truth. Arthur Sterling, the quiet, unassuming art history lecturer, was unmasked as the serial killer who had terrorized Los Angeles. His manifesto, The Obsidian Truth, became a morbid bestseller, analyzed by psychologists and sociologists alike, trying to understand the twisted mind that saw murder as art. Los Angeles slowly began to heal, but the scars remained. The Obsidian Slayer's reign of terror became a dark chapter in the city's history, a chilling reminder of the shadows that can lurk beneath the most polished facades. Thorne and Jenkins, though exhausted, felt a grim satisfaction. They had stopped the monster, but the experience had left an indelible mark on them, a deeper understanding of the darkness that humanity was capable of, and the fragile line between genius and madness. As the city gradually returned to its vibrant, bustling self, a subtle shift remained. People looked at the gleaming skyscrapers, the aspiring actors, the powerful moguls, and the celebrated artists with a new, unsettling awareness. The Obsidian Slayer had indeed revealed a truth, however warped and terrifying, that beneath the glitz and glamour, the city of angels held its own deep, profound shadows, forever etched onto the collective consciousness, like a single, chilling shard of obsidian.